All right, here we go. Just wanted to kick this off with an introduction to somebody that I think could really help us to understand a little bit about coding in the coding world. This is Michael. I would like to introduce him a little bit more, but I would rather have Michael introduce himself. Michael, tell us a little bit about who you are and what do you do?
A little bit about myself. I'm from Virginia. I went to college at Radford University. I majored in information systems and technology. I was originally going to do programming. I was going to do computer science, but I got into programming classes in college and doing the labs and stuff. I was just like, well, I don't know if I want to sit at a desk and do this all day. So I wanted to mix it up and do, half business side and then also have that technology side. So I did the Bachelor's of Science in Information and Technology, which it gave me knowledge of that technical side, but then also the business side, which I think is a really, I think it's beneficial to do it that way because you're learning coding. I also learned networking, even though I never used it, but I still learned it. And then you learn like the business aspect of it and, how a software business runs and then how does business run in general, which I think is it's invaluable. So I ended up majoring in that. I graduated. I went to work in the DC area. I worked at Northrop Grumman. What I was doing at Northrop Grumman, I was basically an analyst. So I wasn't exactly doing what I wanted to do, which I wanted to be, again, it was one of those things is I wanted to be more on the technical side, but I didn't know what exactly yet. So this was a good avenue and it was a great company. Northrop Grumman is a great company. And so, this was my end, right? So this was how I got into the business. I was doing analytical work. What you learn in college is a process called business process reengineering. And basically at Northrop Grumman, I was on a team that was really, because I had learned what business process reengineering is, Northrop Grumman on this project, they were doing a little bit of that in the sense that they were taking old methods of doing stuff and, making it paperless, right? So we're moving from paper to doing it all electronically. So that's in essence a little bit about business process reengineering, like reengineering how your business does its processes, right? So how they operate. So I did that for a little bit, and then I moved into quality assurance, right, into software testing at Northrop Grumman. But even still, the QA I was doing was, when you hear the word QA, there's a lot of different types of quality assurance. You can do, there's software quality assurance. There's, you have big ones when you're getting into like satellite quality assurance, which is like you're dealing with, and it's been so long, like you're dealing with SATCOM. Now I'm getting even more technical and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But it's communication between the satellite and, lack of better word, like your computer, right?
Right.
So, but the QA I was doing was just software testing, manual testing, kind of like, for example, going to Google, enter this and do so-and-so, but we're doing it on the Northrop Grumman software that we were pushing out to the military. So that stuff started getting redundant. So I wanted to do something even more technical. Northrop Grumman, unfortunately, didn't really have any opportunities for me. So I moved on to Booz Allen Hamilton and got into more consulting, which is an area I still like and I was really interested in as well. So at Booz Allen Hamilton, again, it's a great company. I worked there and I was working with satellites and I was sometimes doing software testing. But the good thing is it wasn't just the software testing. I was able to move around and do other things. So it wasn't until I got a job. I moved out to California, and I got a job at this small company because, you know, I've been working at big companies for a while. So I started at this small company that dealt with medical software, specifically organ donations. And I was doing QA there, and it was manual QA. So what happened was, for me, I was like, this is getting redundant. I want to learn automation, right? So what automation is basically what you can do manually with your mouse and your keyboard to your computer. I can automate, and I can I can write code to drive your browser to do whatever you want it to do, right? Basically. So that's when I decided, okay, I'm going to teach myself Python. And the reason why I chose Python instead of JavaScript, Python is becoming very popular. A lot of companies are starting to use it. So you guys are doing a great job by learning Python. And the good thing is you learn Python, it's going to be easier for you to pick up other programming languages like JavaScript, C, C++, and stuff. So, so what I did at that job, even though I was a manual QA, I taught myself Python. And if you guys get a chance, there's udemy.com. They have great lessons online if Ryan hasn't already told you about them. And then Code Academy. Code Academy are great tools that you can use to learn code, and then also to to practice that. So I started, practicing on my own with Python. And then what I did, that small company didn't have an automation team. So what I did was, okay, I'm going to start automating this manual QA stuff. So I started doing that because one of the things that I think is very helpful is with programming language, you have to practice. You have to, take the time to write your own code. And, when you have some free time, play around online and try to, use code and create your own things or your own scripts. This also looks good that you guys can get started now. Even in high school, you can get started with that. And it looks good for you in college, and it looks good for you when you ever decide to get into the workforce. But anyway, so I taught myself Python, and I started automating this stuff at that job. But one of the things that I was having an issue with, there was no one there senior that could help me out with issues when I ran into them. So for me, I was like, if I was going to continue to grow in my automation, that I needed to move on and go to another company. So I left that company and went to another company, and I went to ZipRecruiter, which is where I'm at now. I went in as a QA analyst, but then about a year later, or 2 years ago, I joined the automation team. And I've been on that team, and I've been a QA engineer since. So being on this team with seniors that are very experienced Python programmers and stuff, it's helped me, and it's taught me things about programming just outside of knowing what code is. But it's also helping you on writing better code. So yeah, so that's a little bit about me and what I'm doing right now. Basically, I'm doing QA automation work, automating our company's, our processes in terms of like how a job seeker would go in and look for a job, and then how an employer would go in and look for a job. So basically, I just automate that stuff in our staging environment to help out our QA team, which does the manual testing and stuff. So
I'm wondering, why would somebody try to learn code on their own? What's the significance of that? Because you can probably, maybe, I don't know if that's a barrier to entry. That's just simply you just gotta do it, and you gotta do it on your own. What's the significance of that?
A couple things. One, you can save yourself a lot of money. I'm going to be straight up with you. Because companies don't care so much. Like, they're happy you have your degree. Don't get me wrong. And I think you should go get your degree. But real life application of what you know is far greater and is more beneficial to a company than just the fact that, oh, I took coding in school or in college. So the reason why I think you should teach yourself on your own and start practicing on your own is that, so now you can actually show people what you have done, right? You can actually go into an interview and be like, hey, I know maybe I don't have a degree, or at least I didn't go to a 4-year college, or, but at least you can say that, hey, this is what I did. This is my experience. I built this by myself, and that, again, it's so valuable, and especially in the tech industry. Yeah. So you would be surprised that how these tech companies are looking for talent. And what I mean by talent is people that know programming and know development, and especially people of color, people like minorities. And that's why it's so important to learn, these skill sets. It's so valuable, because here's the thing. Let's say you don't even use it. It's so valuable that you know code and you know back end and how that works. It's important because it's the backbone of any software company. So even if you went in as like a manager, or a program manager, or an analyst in general, the fact that you're knowledgeable about the system and the inner workings is valuable. It's invaluable.
What are some of the barriers to entry that people usually get hung up on?
Some of the barriers of entry. Experience, I think. Again, I think that's one of the things that I was trying to touch on. It's kind of hard because it's a catch-22, right? That's why I was saying, especially in this day and age and the access that you kids have to technology. Like, when I was growing up in high school, like, we didn't have that type of access to technology. Like, just to be straight up. So you guys have a lot of access to technology in the sense of, again, even if you don't have a job, you can intern. Always look to intern, even now that you're in high school, because even at ZipRecruiter, we have interns. I don't know if we do right now at the moment due to the COVID situation and everything like that in businesses in general. But, companies do have internships, and, they might not pay, and they may pay something, little. But that starts building your resume early. So that way, when you graduate high school or you graduate college, you already have this experience. You're already ahead of the game. One of the things I thank God for is that, I had people in my life, like my mother, the counselors at my university, that were telling me about doing internships. And me doing the internships put me in a position, even after college, to be like, at least I have something on my resume to get me into the door, right? So, there's kids in school that don't think about that. So you always have to be forward thinking when it comes to stuff like that. And I think that's the biggest barrier when it comes to getting in, is having that experience. But again, having the knowledge and having the background. If you have a computer science degree, they're going to be like, oh, they're going to put you at the top. They're, especially the entry level. But I mean, even now, I'm telling you, like, software companies are looking at college kids that are coming out with these engineering degrees, computer science degrees. They're looking for you. So I think the only barrier is yourself. to be honest with you.
Wow.
I think that's the only barrier.
Okay. Okay. So if you want it, there are avenues for you to get it.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. And you have to be persistent. You can't, in any business, you can't just give up because maybe you just didn't get it immediately. Like take your time. I know for me, when I first graduated college, I was getting a little frustrated. I was like, man, I'm just gonna go back to grad school. I was like, I'm not working. I wasn't trying to stay at my mom's house again. It's like, I'm gonna go to grad school, do something. And there were times where I could have took like little, I don't want to knock it down as remedial, but in other words, like jobs that weren't for me, that weren't in my area of degree. You know what I mean? And so I could have taken those jobs and it would have took me in a direction that who knows where I've been. Lord knows where I've been. But, thank God for patience and, waiting for that opportunity at Northrop Grumman. It took some time, but it happened and it brought me, I think it started me in my route to where I am today.
What are some things that you think are helpful to have in your portfolio that gets you into the door when it comes to programming?
Outside of internships, I think, let's think about with coding. I'm more on the Selenium WebDriver automation side of things, right? But as a person, if say you want to get into development, develop websites, write code on that website that does certain things. The interesting thing is that now, you can buy your own URL, build your own website, learn PHP, Perl, and all that other good stuff. And then, you're learning Python, learn JavaScript, build a website, and they can easily go to the website and see what you built.
Mm-hmm.
That is your portfolio. Like a painter paints and builds up a booklet of stuff, or a designer that designs clothes. They're drawing pictures in a booklet. So you build websites. You can start now and build websites for people. And in a sense, you could build websites that could be a side gig. And you'd be like, look, this is what I've been doing. And I've been making money off of it.
What is the code editor that you like using?
Well, at work, we're using Sublime. I like Sublime. I also like PyCharm. I haven't used it in a couple of years, but PyCharm is good. At my old job, when I was first starting coding, I was using Visual Studio.
Okay.
Visual Studio is good. So, but for me, I like Sublime, and it's probably because I'm just familiar with it, because I'm more familiar with it. But ultimately, it comes down to like error reporting and runtime and like how it runs and how it builds to run. So Sublime's pretty good. It works well with us. So, but those are the three that I've used before.
Cool.
But to be fair, I would use, because I feel like Visual Studio is a little bit more complicated. I feel like I would do PyCharm or Sublime, like just to get started out, so you can maintain your code and play around with stuff.
What kind of Python function do you like using? Do you use on a regular basis, for example?
You know what? In the stuff that I'm writing right now, I use a lot of like checking the length. So like length, these are built-in Python functions. Yeah. Length. I use print a lot, and I know that's super basic, but it's good in catching errors, right? So you can interject them in your code if you're like trying to troubleshoot errors in your code. It's very useful and handy. I use list comprehension, and it's not so much a function, but it's useful because it allows you how you would do like a for loop and you usually multiple lines. It allows you to do that in one line. So it's a lot cleaner. Let me think what else, because I wrote down get attribute. Use that because when you're automating the web and you're automating like stuff in Chrome, you're checking the elements, the CSS on the page, right? You're checking these elements on the page. So, I need to sometimes get the attribute of a specific element on the page. So that's a function we use pretty often. I use it. List. I use text. I need to get the text of a field on a web page. Open. Open's a good one because, especially at say like ZipRecruiter, right? As you can imagine, ZipRecruiter is for job seekers and employers, right? So for example, a job seeker, they need to upload a resume. So in order to do that, like we can automate that. So we use the open function to open up an external file, right? And then you can read write to that file. So I think those are the main ones. I don't know if I say, and dictionary, we use dictionaries. So yeah, those are the main ones.
That's good.
Off the top of my head right now. So
no, for real. Yeah. That's good. Does that include any particular libraries or anything like that? Do you have to use a lot of, or even not even just that? Do you have to refer a lot to like reference sheets just to make sure that you were?
Come on, absolutely. I mean, I would dare to say, I would want to meet the developer that never has to refer or go back to refer to, libraries, functions, or doesn't have to go to stackoverflow.com to find out what's going on with their code. So I'm always referencing. I think it's, the thing is with code, and even Python now, I can't remember. I think they're on version 3.9 or something, maybe even further.
Yep.
It's 3.9. Okay.
Yep.
I'm not sure. I don't think we're on 3.9 just yet. Every company is going to do different. But yeah, I mean, I'm definitely always, checking back to see. I even have to remind myself what some of the functions do. I have to be like, okay, wait a minute. Okay, let me just make sure this is doing. Because say you'll be coding something. Let me just give you guys a tip real quick. The key to writing good code is a couple things, and I wanted to write this down so I can say it. It's not just about getting your software to do what you want it to do. It's getting it to do what you want it to do in the least amount of code and also efficiently, that it can be reused and it's also understandable, right? So somebody else could come in and look at your code and be like, oh, okay, I know what it's doing, which is one of the reasons why I always put notes in your code, like a little line about what this code does, so that way, if somebody comes along that doesn't know anything, they can look at your code and be like, oh, okay, I see what it's doing, I get it, and they could go in and add on, take away, or update, right?
That's good.
So that's always, so always remember that it's not so much as, I'm getting it to do what it wants, but you want to be efficient in how you code, right? Because ultimately, too, you're taking up a lot of space in terms of like how fast the code will run, because it has to go through more code in order to do a simple task. It's going to take longer for the code to execute.
Right.
So always keep that in mind, and always keep in mind that you want to reuse that code, right? So say you have a code that goes in and logs in and enters in certain information, and you have to do that so many times, right? You don't want to write that code and say you need to use that code elsewhere, right? Somewhere else in your development, right? So that's when functions and methods come into play, because you can always call those functions you've already created and methods you've already created. You can call them and reuse them. So that's the reason why I say it's important that you write code that is reusable.
In your job, do you find yourself having a lot of high pressure times, or is it more like chill?
Um, I think I'll say because I came in to this team when a lot of stuff had already been developed. So it's not like any like time limits necessarily or needing to get something done. I will say I've had a time crunch this year because we've been trying to get QA, the manual QA team, off of doing the redundant manual QA stuff so that they can focus on special features of the software. And so I've been, trying to cover all the job seeker regression stuff. So that's kind of been, what I've been working on. And it's a lot. It's a lot of tests. I think we have over almost 200 tests just for job seekers. So, and when you're doing manual QA, and especially when you're doing web QA, like web automation, it can be flakier because you're dealing with server issues sometimes, because if you run into a server issue on a website, your test is going to fail, right? So sometimes you run into flakiness because anytime you're testing on a website, it's always going to be, if you click on this, sometimes it doesn't open up and then your whole test crashes. So, so yeah, that's what I would say for me lately is trying to get all that complete. So.
Okay. When is coding fun for you?
Oh man, coding is fun when you get to create your own stuff from scratch, right? That's the best because you don't have to read other people's code. Like as exciting as that sounds, reading other people's code, it's not. And I'm not gonna fake the funk on that. It's not that reading other people's code is not fun, even if they have notes in there, because it's like it's an endless loop that you keep going. You're reading this, and it goes back to this. But being able to create your own code. So say you have an assignment to do. So now this is you. You get to start from scratch. You get to create your own class, your own methods in that class, and your own modules, so people can reuse those modules in their other tests and stuff like that. So that's when it gets exciting, when you get to create your own code from scratch.
That sounds fun. That sounds really cool.
Yeah,
Be creative. I think there's
that's the best part. Like because right now, for me, it's a lot of me reusing old code, updating code, and then a little bit of creating my own stuff.
What are some of the biggest mistakes people make when they're coding?
Not leaving notes. One of the main things is writing code that can't be reused, right? So now you're just creating code. Like, don't get me wrong, like some code you're not going to be able to reuse. It's very specific.
Yeah.
But when it comes to within Selenium WebDriver and test automation, you should be able to reuse, or you should be able to write code that can be reusable to create less code in your suite, in your test suite. So I think that's one of the biggest. Another, and like I said, notes and not knowing, because again, that's one of the most annoying things, is to see code that you have to go in and update, and you don't even know what it does. Like, imagine going in and, seeing all these functions and methods, and you're just like, well, what does this do? I don't understand what's going on. So it's always good to have notes. That's one of the big things. And then I think that's about it that I can think of right now.
Okay, that's actually I think that's eye-opening for a lot of people, because when you don't leave those comments in your code, people cannot follow. And sometimes I think people end up making code thinking, well, at least I know what's going on, so therefore I can troubleshoot. But you're not always the one working on that piece of code.
Right.
You're not always going to be that person.
Right. Right.
So that's
let me tell you this real quick too. It's funny you say that, because I've written code like a year ago, and then something changes in our system that I have to go back in and update that code. And because I forgot to even put notes in it, I'll be like, I don't forgot what this does. You know what I'm saying? Like I have to run the code again and be like, oh, okay, now I get it. Let me update it. But I mean, even for yourself, because sometimes you'll forget what the code does, you know, because you'll move on, you'll work on other stuff. So
how much of coding is dealing with errors?
I'll take it like this. I think I can't speak for a developer. I can speak for automation. A lot of it is, so every day we run our staging builds, which goes through this whole regression cycle test that we have. And we do that to catch any bugs in the system, and any breaks, right? So, you know, every day we have fails, but it's not necessarily because something's broken on the system, but because maybe perhaps our test just failed because there was an error or something. There was a blip in our servers or something. So we go back in and rerun it. If I rerun the code or rerun the test and I'm still seeing the fail, there's a couple things I have to troubleshoot. One, is it an actual bug on the system, or is it a bug in our code, something needs to be updated? So, you know, that can take some time depending on how many tests fail. You know, a lot of it is updating elements in your code, right? So elements that can change because developers had updated a page on the website, right? So, you know, that affects our code if they went in and changed anything on the back end in terms of, like, you know, the elements on the page. So then we have to update code. But it's not so much a lot of error checking and coding for us, unless you're just developing and you're trying to figure out why something keeps breaking that you're working on. I don't think we don't spend like a lot of time necessarily error checking what we've done, but it's more so of like what may be broken on the system.
What are some of the rewards of coding? Like, people want to know how much money do coders make, for example.
Okay, so we're gonna be,
okay,
that's how it's money. Okay, I'll put it to you like this. Look, in LA, like an experienced engineer out of college, I mean, you can make six figures. You know, an inexperienced person can still make just under six figures. I mean, a computer science major, I mean, just look at the tech field, right? Look at Facebook, look at Google, look at Twitter, look at all these companies. You know, these are software companies where you had engineers working on the companies. And I want you to think about this. This is, you know, say you join a small software company. They can pay you well as an engineer, but, you know, or they might not pay you that well, maybe as much as maybe a competitor or a big company like an established one like Google or Twitter, but they can give you a lot of stock options. Now, let me give you an example of these big tech companies you see now. They weren't always big tech companies, right? They were a startup at one point. Now, for example, say you come out of college, you're an engineer, you're looking for a job, it's a small company. We'll call this small company Facebook. Now, Facebook is not public, meaning they're not openly trading to the public, right? So say, you know, Facebook couldn't pay you the salary that, say, Google can, but they can give you 1 million stock options. Now in your mind, you're like, well, what am I going to do with this? You've given me $1 million of nothing, right? You're thinking in your head, this is crap. But then 2-3 years down the road, they IPO. Now that million stock options are worth, I'll put it to you like, if the stock share for $1 a share, you're a millionaire now.
Right.
You're a millionaire. If they sell for so much as just $10 a share, you have $10 million. So, that's one of the benefits of coding and being really good at this. Don't look at these celebrities and these rappers and all these people that entertain, these artists and stuff, and think, man, do it big like that. No. You need to look at these guys that are at these tech companies. They're the ones buying these mansions on their hills and that own all this stuff. And look, I'm not saying pursue money and gold, because that's one thing. Don't pursue money. Yep. Do what you like doing, right? If you don't like coding, don't code. And I think if you guys are doing it in high school, I think clearly you guys have some kind of interest in it. And I think that that's the financial benefit of being in coding. And then just one of the personal things of coding is knowing that you built something, right? Knowing that, when you write code, when you talk to other people that have coded and they figured out how something worked and they've been working on it all day, and finally at the end of the day, they figured it out. There's such a good feeling like, yes, I did it. There's an accomplishment to it. You're like, yes. And that's something that you get out of coding, right? There's a sense of accomplishment. You've done something. I mean, in the same way as somebody that, I don't know, builds a house or, puts together something, right? Or finishes a film, right? You get that sense of accomplishment. I did it.
What are some general advice you would give to students if they want to try coding, they want to maybe take it on, or even if they were just wondering, will I ever use this?
Don't just shrug it off, but take it in. At least get an understanding of it. And even if you don't pursue it, or don't even immediately pursue it, because one of the things I'll tell you is that what helped me out learn Python faster was the fact that I had already coded in college, and the fact that I had started in high school. I learned C++ in high school. So I already had that foundation of learning programming language. So it was easier for me to be like, oh, okay, yeah, strings and variables and stuff, now it's starting to come back in. You're going to pick it up faster if you ever decide to get back into it late in the game like I did. So that would be my advice to you, is to pay attention. Even if you're not going to use it, pay attention to it. And even if you do like it, start playing with your own code. Start, write your own, create your own website, and then start playing around with it. Start learning Visual Basic too.
The only thing I heard was pay attention. Pay attention. I heard pay attention. That's what I heard. Pay attention.
Yeah.
That's good stuff. I want to ask you a particular question, because I realize sometimes coding does not have the same type of access that we would hope for those who maybe look like us. And I'm wondering, what does that look like in the real world? Do you find people that look like us, that are people of color, in coding? And how do you overcome some of those barriers that may exist?
Are there people like us in coding? Yes, but few, which is discouraging, but it's not a crutch, right? So what I mean by that is, look, man, if you can do the job, they don't care. These companies care about bottom line. In other words, they want to make money. And at the end of the day, green matters more than black, white, purple, green, or blue. right? But then at the same time, I'm not going to completely ignore the disparities when it comes to people of color and people like us in that field. I just think we don't push it enough out there and people are aware of it. Like, I come from having nothing. One of the things I say that I don't like saying I come from nothing. To me, that means like your family ain't nothing. And that ain't the case. I mean, I come from having nothing, meaning like I like we were poor. Like, it's not like I was rich or anything. But the main thing is that you need to work hard, right? You're going to run into, you know, I experienced, and I'll tell you this, and that first company I worked for, Northrop Grumman, of the new hires that came on, it was almost like the freshman class, right? I was the only Black one in there. And I was surrounded by, you know, nothing but white people. And I remember busting my behind, like trying to learn this stuff fast and quick, right? And I never forget one of the white guys I worked with. He would make fun of me because I was working hard at trying to do that, right? Mm-hmm. And I ended up going out to the military bases, and I ended up going out before any of the other people because I was already prepared, right? And then I never forget, my manager at the time, they knew I wanted to get more into the technical side. But because they had me going out doing these presentations and stuff to DC, and I was in DC doing them and then traveling, I missed out on an opportunity, but she held it for somebody else. Not one person of color got to go to this position. At the time, it was like a build position, which is, you know, software builds. And I was like, great. I don't want to do this analyst stuff anymore. It was like, so I felt left out. So then one of the guys from the QA team, he was like, come to the QA team, man. He was like, I'll have you on the team. I was like, all right, whatever. Because my idea was like, I was going to, let me just get in development or something at that point. But that's how I ended up in QA. And the point is, and what I was saying is that the same guy, because I ended up not liking the QA I was doing. So I was like coming into work at like 9 o'clock and leaving at like 4. Like, I was done for the day, like, peace. You know, it's a salary job, so you can do that. And then I would get accused by the same guy. Like, oh, well, there goes Mike. You know, he comes in late, leaves early, blah, blah, blah. The same guy that told me I was working hard, like I'm working too hard at the point. You see what I'm saying? So one of the things I've learned is that you can't care about what people say. Work hard. Work hard. Who gives a crap what these people are saying? You're always going to run into these. That's, to me, that was almost like a, I don't know if it was racial, but it comes down to like, you know, making it seem like, you know, even if you do, you're screwed. Even if you don't, you're screwed. Right?
Yeah.
So for me, the way I think about it is like, have this mindset. Move on. You don't like the company? There's other companies out there. You know what I'm saying? Nobody owns you. Because I'll tell you this. These companies will let you go at the drop of a hat. They don't care. So you can only be as loyal as that paycheck is. See, here's the thing. Coding can just be your way into the door. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to stay there. You can move on to other positions. You may see somebody be like, oh, I like that. What do you do? Right? And one of the most important things when you're in this business is networking. Networking.
Talk about networking. Talk to us about it.
Networking. What I mean by that is like, be easy to work with. You know what I'm saying? Like, be easy to work with. Half the time, it's just people want to work with you because they like you. That's honestly what, that's 99% of the business, right? Like, I know that sounds crazy because you got to know something, right? But 99%, like, people want to be able to work with you. I never forget, we hired somebody in my last job, the last company I worked at, and he was terrible. Like, he was terrible all the way around, and he didn't last long. But he had this big position. He was, they hired him as a, what did they hire? Like, I can't even remember. Like, he was operations manager. And I was like, and I remember talking to him, and he worked at Deloitte, which is a consulting firm. So then I brought up to him Booz Allen Hamilton, that I used to work there. And he was just kind of like, oh, I've never heard of him. And I was like, in my mind, I'm like, but they compete against each other. Like they're competing firms. Like, how have you never heard of them? I was like, all right. But anyway, he just wasn't very nice to the people at the company. And people didn't like him, even if he knew what he was doing, which I didn't think he really did. But people didn't like him. So one of the things I've learned is like people can kind of deal with you if you don't know everything, but if they like you, right? So one of the things is like, be likable, personable, but don't be fake, right? Don't be fake. But, you know, that goes a long way. Networking, you know, go to networking events. Excuse me. If you know, I know they have in LA. I haven't been to any here, but I know back in DC, they would have, what do you call it, like the job conferences,
Yep.
right?
The job fair.
So, yeah, job fairs, there you go. Job fairs. Oh, and even now that you're in high school, you can go to these job fairs. I'm assuming, I think you can. Like, go to the job fairs, just, you know, get in there, you know, because companies would love, like, especially in this day and age, with everything happening, trust me, these companies now are like, we want to hire minorities. We want to hire them. We want to hire them. We want to hire them fast. Like they just need to be qualified.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's not like one of the things is like when I was younger, you know, they might not have been looking as much, but now it's like, no, we want them. We want them. They just, you know, do they know how to do it? So I think one of the important things is try to find job fairs, network, meet. You know, let me tell you something. If you go to college, if you go to school, even your classmates you're in class with, man, it's like networking doesn't necessarily mean like you're being disingenuous about things, but it's like having these contacts. Like say your friend at school ends up getting a job at this place. They can be your into that company, right? Because you're friends with them. It just so happens that I got the Northrop Grumman job because one of my good friends, his dad was one of the high ups at Northrop Grumman and Booz Allen. So he was able to get me into an interview.
Yeah.
So the best thing, you know, all these jobs comes from, you know, is who you know, right? So start networking. You know, don't let anybody tell you that you can't do something, or, you know, if you have the right tools, you can do this, right? You know, take the time, try to, and if you don't know how to do it, find somebody that does and ask them, right? And then just try to remain humble.
What you said just now was important. First, one, being humble, not thinking that you know so much or too much, right, that you really do know, but also making sure that if you don't know the answer, asking somebody is a big deal.
It's huge. It's huge. You know, again, don't, you know, some people are like, fake it till you make it. Don't do that. You know, you don't have to do that. You guys are young, right? Like you guys are young, like you're still learning. Like I would want you to ask questions. I wish that there were certain things I knew now. I wish I knew them back then, right? So ask people that are experienced. Ask people that are at the place where you want to be, right? And ask them, how did they go about getting there? What did they do? And pay attention in school. Go to, you know, talk to your teachers. I mean, talk to Ryan here. You have good resources now. And you guys are already on the right track. It seems like you're really serious about learning code. You're on the right track.
That's good. One thing that I've been telling my students is if you can communicate well, you have a faster track to becoming leadership. I'm noticing that there are people who don't necessarily know how to ask the questions. They'll rather be stuck than figure out how to get out of it and actually risk being seen as I don't know anything, but still have the answers. what is the significance of being able to communicate to other people when it comes to being a coder?
It's very important. I think that's, being able to communicate is so important. And I'll say this, one of the problems I run into with working with some developers, they're terrible communicators. And I think that in this business, if you can code and you communicate well, oh man, that's priceless. Because you'd be surprised how many developers I meet that the only language they speak in is 10011001110, right?
Binary,
you know what I'm saying? Like
only binary.
Yeah, binary. That's all they speak, and it's like they expect everybody to know what they're talking about, and that's terrible communication. So I would say learn how to communicate. And in college, I took a public speaking class. It was great class. See, that's one of the benefits. Like if you major in computer science, but then also have a major in business, right? Yeah. You have both of them. Now you know how to speak to people. You know how to communicate. One of the, and I think even communicating, like, be upfront. One of the most important things is that humility in coming and being like, I don't know everything that's going on right now, but this is what I do know, right? This is what's happening. It's always important to know what's happening and why it's happening. Or excuse me, not why it's happening, but at least know what is going on, even if you don't know why it's happening, right? Because that's when you would have other experts come in who may be more senior and be like, hey, hold on, I know what this is, I know what's going on. But if you don't communicate that, if you have this pride about you, then pride comes before the fall, right? So if you have this pride about you, then it's ultimately going to get worse and worse. It's I've seen people at companies. The guy at my last company, he was a prideful person too, and so I think communication is very important. And again, this goes into just being a likable person, being able to talk to people.
What are some last words maybe that you have for people that you think will be helpful?
Keep God first. Because look, don't chase money, right? Because it's easy to get into this business and hop from one company to another, to another, to another. Build foundations in relationship with companies. One of the things out in LA that you see a lot is a ton of different software companies out here. And you have people that will skip from one company to another and then end up, this company will fall. It's that idea of the grass is always greener on the other side, right? The whole idea that, oh, this is terrible here. I'm out. I'm just going to leave. Instead of trying to stay and see how you can make it better. A lot of companies are just looking for leaders. They're looking for people that are going to innovate and going to be like, hey, I'm seeing this wrong in a company. Maybe we could try doing something like this. And that's that's a great quality to have. And I think even if it doesn't work, some company is going to appreciate that. So I think the most important thing, just stay humble. Because I've also seen devs who aren't humble, who they act like they know everything, and then like you're below their knowledge level, right? There's this sense in the development world that if you do this, that people that don't, or they're in this, just because they don't do what you do, they're not as smart as you. And so you never want to have that type of attitude. Just because a person doesn't know code doesn't mean they're dumb. It just means they don't know code. You know what I'm saying? Like, but maybe they know how to run a business. Maybe they know how to go in examine what's wrong with the company and create a plan to fix it. Do you know how to do that? You see what I'm saying? So like, you have to respect everybody's position. And I think that's one of the things when you get into coding, it's easy to get into that mindset of like, I'm the king of all and I control all. It's like, no, you don't. No, you don't. I mean, you're another piece of the puzzle that could be taken away at any time.
That's wonderful. Well, like I said, I thank you for doing this for us, talking to the people. And I think this has been helpful for me, for our listeners, and hope that I think that you created some great value for us. So thank you very much for that.
No, thanks for having me. I appreciate it, man.